Do you feel you were born for more? Get ready to uncover your God-given purpose so you can impact the world with your gifts, your talents, and your story.
Welcome to the Purpose Power Summit. I'm your host, Mimika Cooney. Today, we're covering a topic that I love to talk about is goal setting, especially when you involve God. He kind of knows things more than we do. So I think it's kind of appropriate when we need to look at the future and we think, where do we go from here? Is to really rely on what God is showing us. So today's guest is Shae Bynes. She is a passionate storyteller, teacher, and mentor whose life and business were completely transformed by encountering the unrelenting love of God. She is the founder and chief fire igniter of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, a global movement that inspires, teaches, and mentors entrepreneurs who desire to experience God's best and have a greater kingdom impact in the marketplace. So welcome, Shae. So excited to chat with you today. You and I have a history because we have chatted before and we could chat like forever. And
yes,
you've been on my
we don't
podcast.
Have time for today.
I know. So, but if you want to hear more about Shae's story, definitely look up the Mimika TV podcast. She was on that as well. So we had some great, and I've been on your show as well, which has been super fun. So if you want to hear more about that, you definitely do that. But today we're really going to dive into the meat of our purpose because you are as the chief fire igniter. Totally love that. Know how to get the fire started, right? And how to ignite people towards impact because both you and I, we love this whole idea of strategy and planning and pulling ourselves towards the future. So that's what we're doing today. So go for it, Shae. Tell everybody a little bit what you have to say.
Absolutely. So we're talking about goal setting with God. And I wanted to say the with God part because I know what it's like to do goal setting without God. And I also know what it looks like to do goal setting for the glory of God, but not necessarily with Him. And I want to break that down real quick because I think people will find themselves in it. I know for me, before I grew in just intimate relationship with the Lord, I was just writing out the goals that whatever was on my mind, the plans I wanted for me, and I just write them all down and I would operate and create a plan and a strategy around that and go for it. Right. Then eventually I progressed, if you want to call it a progression a little bit, at least then I would put my goals and I'd say, God, please bless my goals. I put them together. Please bless them, and then shifted into, oh, well, you know what? I want to receive input on this thing. I don't want to just say, these are the things that I think that I want, or these are the things that make sense, but let me engage God because He knows my end from the beginning. And so there's a big difference between doing goal setting in these various ways. And so I want to encourage everyone today to do goal setting with God and not just say, hey, I'm doing my plans, but I'm doing it for His glory. So I want to start with that. I think that's really key. I think about one of the significant scripture shifts for me was in Psalm 37:4, where it says, delight yourself in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. When I used to think about that scripture, it was almost like, oh, so what does this mean? So I have desires of my heart and He just gives them to me. And I didn't really get a sense for that, what that really looked like and what that meant. But then when I studied it years later, when I shifted, years later, when I was looking at that and it said delight was to make yourself pliable. Oh, make yourself pliable. Okay, so that means
it doesn't mean I'm just going to be whatever makes me happy, right?
Right. I've got to be pliable and I need to be hearing what this is delighting myself in Him. So if I'm being pliable, that means that I can't have my heart set thing that's from me. This is me being pliable in His hands, right? And then when I was looking at, well, He will give you the desires of your heart. Give was like He'll set them upon you. Like He will set desires upon your heart. So I learned that in intimacy with Him, with taking whatever, with that, He was actually giving me the desires of my heart. My heart's desires were aligning with His heart's desires. And that's the posture that we want to have as kingdom corporate professionals, business owners, whatever. We want to have that heart posture with God so that when we are dreaming with Him and we are goal setting with Him, we are doing it with Him. Another thing I want to share is all of us have different personality types. And goal setting, it should never be a one size fits all kind of thing. Some people, and especially when you're trying to do this thing with God, if you're the type of person who tends to be someone who plans way out, then you could be the kind of person that it's hard for you to do that with God and plan it way out because you're going to go off to the races and not stay in lockstep with him, right? So somebody's strategy of how they do things that's looking at things so far out might not work for you. You know, on the other hand, someone who's just usually kind of, well, I don't know, I really don't kind of plan very much. When I put my goals, I can't even really think that far. You might need to stretch with God and sit with him and have him show you more than normally what you would see. And then put those goals together and move that way. They're shorter term. So we don't all have to look from the perspective of, oh, we're in the midst of, these times. And so I need to get my goals together. And so let me think about the next 5 years. No, you don't need to.
Everyone is like, what? Yeah, 5 years. I'm like, what?
Let me look at the next whole year. You don't even have to look at the whole next year. You could look at the next quarter. Some of you might need to just look at the next 2 weeks.
Exactly. Right. Be like, okay, how long is this fun time gonna continue? Right. And sometimes it's hard. And wouldn't you say, like, because when you feel like you have to do some kind of goal setting, I don't know, I can already feel some people are going, oh, goal setting feels like homework to me. It feels like hard work. And it's like, there's a good reason why we do goals, because I think it helps us stretch ourselves. Like,
yes.
It helps us look for the future, because if we just like stuck with what's in front of us, it can get really depressing and really old very quickly.
Yes.
So that whole idea of goal setting isn't to put that pressure on for you to feel like you have to perform or you have to do something, because it's like, that idea of when you start a diet and you're like, oh, great, day 1 is fabulous, look at me. Day 2 and it's like not so fabulous. So day 3, I'm like, oh, why am I doing this again? That's not the point, right? It's not, as you said, it's not to follow someone else's. So if someone is feeling that sort of overwhelm of like, oh my gosh, sounds like homework. Why do I need to do this? The whole concept of goal setting sounds way too type A for me. How do we help them understand this concept?
Well, if you think about it, God's a progressive God, right? And God's already into our future. And so knowing that if we're supposed to be growing, if we're not growing, we're going backward or we're dying, right? That's not what we want. We want to progress in our lives, progress in the things of God. And that's always a forward movement. And so every single person should be looking at that way. And everyone should be engaging God in the future, because he's a progressive God and we should progress. We shouldn't be looking back at, 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and seeing no shift, right? We're supposed to progress. That's how we're stewarding our lives by progressing, And so I think it's important. I don't think that it needs to feel like a homework assignment for some people. Now, I guess you can kind of categorize this with different people and different styles and what they're looking for. Some people really need to be looking at just like short-term goals, looking at the beginning part of looking at like a month and just saying, wow, because you might be overwhelmed at the thought of thinking beyond a month. So just for this next month, wow, just sit with God, or what would be important over this next month. Think about a few various aspects of your life, in your personal life, in your business life. Just a few things, not a laundry list, just a few things that can be areas of focus. For some of you, I know for me, I don't think a month. I used to only think like it was hard because I wasn't sure what God was doing. I was still trying to figure out what's going on in my business. There were so many things that were shifting and moving. I couldn't look too far from a business goals perspective. I could only look a little bit of a ways. Now I can look months out, but I still don't. 7 years in business, 7 years in this business later, I still can't look out like I'm planning out 5 years. No, God's doing all kinds of stuff, right? But I can look further and I can say, what's going to be the focus over this time? And depending on how you engage with God, that can look different. For me, God gives me lots of pictures. And so what I like to do is I like to sit with God and say, okay, here's what I'm thinking. I'm kind of just in my heart, just kind of sharing here's the things that I'm thinking about. These are things I've written down. But I ask him to show me what I should see concerning these things. And it's like I get pictures and I don't always know what those pictures mean. And sometimes I got to pray into those pictures and ask him more about those pictures. And sometimes he'll just speak something to my heart. And it's like, okay. And he'll start to help me to form thoughts around this goal setting for several months out, maybe 6 months, maybe 6 months, right? Maybe a year. For me right now, it's through the end of this year. And that's not overwhelming for me. And I also don't have the personality type anymore that if we don't hit a certain thing, hit a certain number or whatever, that I become a condemning person or I'm upset with God about it. If
That's important, right? Because I think that's important because that's a lot of times of why people don't follow through with things is because they feel like if they're not exactly on par, like with it, whether it's a training, like my husband's a marathon trainer now. Every day I see him go out and he's like, oh, I really don't feel like doing this. I could really do it the nap. But he knows it's those little baby steps that will get him there. But even though he has good days and he has bad days, he's not going to stop running. And I think that's where we are so hard on ourselves, especially when we have that condemnation, as you say, comes in.
Yes.
And it kind of, we like, oh, well, if I can't do it, I'm just going to give up. I mean, obviously the enemy would love that, but so how do we kind of shift into that? Because first of all, well, let's backtrack a little. I think what we want to define as well is when we have goals, and you said we have ideas which we think are good ideas, because sometimes we have good ideas, but they're not God ideas. How do we tell the difference of when this is actually God's direction and this is just me coming up with some great idea, and how you balance both?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you don't know. Quite honestly, for me, it probably took a good few years for me to develop a greater confidence and discerning between those, because I had to grow in relationship with him and getting to know his voice. But a lot of the times I wouldn't know until I started taking some small steps, not big steps, Mimika, not huge steps, not huge commitment level type stuff, but taking some small steps in a direction and really being sensitive to, okay, how is this moving? Is there peace here? Is there peace here? If there's not peace, if I'm feeling a whole lot of chaos around this thing, or it's just like, this is just not feeling right, then I have reason to pause. If I'm feeling peace, I just want to keep following the peace of God on this thing. And then sometimes, here's what's interesting though, Mimika, is even in the process of doing that, sometimes you will explore something, you'll have complete peace around it, you'll do it, and it still won't hit the expectation that you had for it, which does not necessarily mean that oh, well then therefore that wasn't a God idea. Perhaps there was something you were supposed to learn in that process. I've had that happen many times where there was very important things I learned in the process of something that wasn't some smashing success according to everyone else's or even my own standard. But there was something very key, something very important that was learned in the midst of that was helpful for yet the next thing. So I think we even have to shift our mindsets around what success looks like as we're pursuing these goals.
Kind of, you said expectations, right? Because sometimes we have these expectations of ourselves.
That's right. You have to be able to yield expectations to God. You have to be able to surrender those expectations to him. And when you do that, that's what can keep you from having condemnation, and also being able to find the gold in the midst of stuff that wasn't perfect. It wasn't just like the way you would have liked to have seen it. You'll be able to actually discern where was the gold in that. Where's the stuff? Because God doesn't waste anything. So where's the goodness in this, so that helps me for the next thing?
Exactly. Well, hindsight, they said hindsight's in 2020, right? You look back and you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. But at the time, we always feel like, what does this mean? What did this mean? And it reminds me of the movies The Karate Kid, for giving away our age, right? Us Gen X's, wax on, wax off. He's like, why are you making me wash the car and paint the fence? Because at the time, he had no idea how this was relevant. But then all of a sudden, when he was in a fight scene, oh, I get it. That's like the moves. And it's kind of like if we just got, and I admit I've had to learn this the hard way, thinking I know it. And eventually I'm like, okay, God, there's no point in me resisting, because resistance is futile. Just go with the flow and just take those one step at a time. Because you said, it's just moving. Because wouldn't you say that's what holds people that kind of pontificate and think they want the whole blueprint, the whole plan, then I'll move. Why do you feel that's an issue?
Yeah, I mean, Mimika, if you think about a GPS, we have to be moving in the car for it to say recalculating, right? For it to give us new direction. I like to think of it that way, like with the Holy Spirit. It's like we're not going to get the whole blueprint up front. And if we're not moving, we can't redirect. And so a lot of people are waiting for a full blueprint that's not going to come. And even if you think that you're going to get a full blueprint, whatever you got, that's actually not the full thing. You're actually fooling yourself to think that even that's the full thing. And so we have to be stewards of what God places on our heart by moving. Even if we don't know what all the details are, just follow the peace. And the thing is, what I love so much about God is that he's not condemning if you don't get it perfect. So what if you don't get it perfect? Like, everything can be redeemed and restored in the kingdom of God. It's like, so as you're moving, as you're stewarding the things that he puts on your heart, if you find out that was just a pretty good idea, but it wasn't a God idea, it isn't the end of the world.
Exactly. It's kind of learning even the things that a no is just as good as a yes. Like I say,
absolutely.
It's you kind of like can go down the list. And if you have too many options, even if you get a no, it's like bumper cars. Whoop, okay, that wasn't it. Oh, that wasn't it. But you kind of pick up, you learn, you get a muscle, you get strength. You
yes.
Things like I look back as well at the time thinking, Lord, why didn't you give me the whole blueprint? Because he said, if I told you, you would have freaked you out. And you stayed stuck because if he gives us too much at a time, first of all, either it A, overwhelms us and we refuse to move, or B, we get ahead of God and we think, okay, I got this, I don't need you. And then we lose our faith, right? Because that's right. You have and part of what you do, which I love, you always talk about it, and the kingdom-driven entrepreneur is this hustle versus going with heart. And I think we need to touch on that for a bit and how this is really relevant to goal setting, because we can feel like, especially us go-getters who are in business or we do things and we lead others, we feel like we have to keep pushing and going, but there's a little bit of a problem with that.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about just the very nature of Jesus, it's working by his grace. It was that scripture in the other interview, we talked about that, which was Matthew 11:28, verse 28 through 30. And in the Message translation, he says, are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me, get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I'll never lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Many people know that as, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, right? But I think that we have to lean into that, because there's so much in that. Well, I'm not going to put any heavy burdens on you. All burdens, they belong to me. They don't belong to you. There's a rhythm. There's a grace in flowing with me. There's not stress, right? There's peace. There's joy. When you work, it doesn't mean everything goes perfectly, but that's the beauty of his joy. And that's the beauty of peace, right? And so there's that walking with him, that diligent work. I like to talk about diligent work now instead of like grinding and working hard. I just did a video about this the other day. It's like the word diligent means careful, steady, energetic work. The grind is like anxious toiling. It's just like constantly going after it hard, no matter what. Hit a wall, no, I'm going to crush through it. Like,
yeah, it's like it's just keep, crazy. Keep going till you drop and all that.
Right.
What good is that to you or anybody else?
It's no good.
And it's like, I always liken this. I had this conversation with my 21-year-old the other day when we were talking about things. And I said, have you realized sometimes that when you try hustle hard and you push and God has closed the door, you are just going to hurt yourself trying to ram that door open? Because if God closes that door, you pretty much better learn fast to move on. And then she goes, some of the other opportunities that come her way, like when she's not try to push things, like she had got an internship for the summer and she goes, I didn't have to do much. It's like they phoned and they got me an offer. And it's just, I'm like, well, hello, welcome, congratulations. You made it to the Grace Camp. You actually know what this means. You do but she still had to put her resume out.
That's right. There was still work to do.
Yeah, she still had to answer the emails and get on a phone call and do the work and present herself. But the results were not reliant on her effort. Was reliant on her faithfulness. And I think that's where a lot of us Christians get it wrong, is we think that if you're not doing it right, whack you on the head with the belts and start, hurting yourself because if you're not doing it hard and you're not working hard enough, is the whole concept of where we get stuck. It's almost like when it's easy, we think, oh, is it a catch? It seems too easy.
Right. And the thing is, and I know a lot of times I'll get feedback on that, because people are like, but what are you saying, that things are just going to happen for me? I'm like, well, yes and no. Right. So you have to be diligent to do work. You have to plant the seeds. You have to do work. We are talking about working by the power of his grace, right? You have to work. But when you're working in that way, there's like a supernatural grace on that work. And you do get I call it supernatural productivity. There is way more productivity on than you could have done in your own strength, right? That's just the bottom line. So when people think, well, it's easy. Well, sometimes aspects of it can seem easy because you didn't have to force it to happen. It was a favor of God on a situation.
My
right?
mom always says she likes to call it, she calls it elastic time. She says
elastic time, right?
And I love that. It's like, when you're doing things with God, it's like he can catapult you from one area and you're almost like, oh, that didn't take so long. That was quick. Like, how did I get here? When you're like driving home, you don't realize, oh, I got home. I didn't realize I did that. So I like that concept, it's like, you don't have to push to get there.
That's right. But the funny part about that is sometimes our expectation is that timeline would have been like, that would have happened in a year. And maybe it actually happened in 5, but what happened was, and I can tell you, this is my testimony, where something where I thought was going to happen in a certain time didn't happen in that time, but I also wasn't grinding. But when it happened, it was exponential. It was supernatural. It was like, wait, how did that happen? Just like that fast. And so it just seemed like it happened so fast, and it did, but it didn't. There was the diligence and the walking in his grace, learning the lessons that needed to be learned, figuring out the things that needed to get figured out, all of those things. And then the grace and the favor over it was just like yields a result that's Ephesians 3:20 type of result where you're like, whoa, that was like exceeding abundantly above all that I could ever have imagined. Because I don't understand how that could have happened quite like that, even though the fullness of the season wasn't overnight. Right?
Exactly. And you
but
mentioned
it looks
important
overnight
word
to everybody else.
Exactly. Well, they said it was overnight success, but it was a long night.
It was this 8-year overnight success.
Exactly. And the thing is, you mentioned the word seasons, and I'm a very big proponent on this. And people forget, like if we look at how God works, look at nature. When we plant a seed, first of all, we got to find the good soil, and then we got to get the rocks out, and then we got to toil it, and then we got to plant the seed. People tend to think that, it's seed time harvest. It's seed time, then harvest. And during that time when the seed is germinating, it's in the dark, it feels gross, it's no one can see what's going on. It doesn't feel like there's anything going on, but we have to keep watering and feeding and sunlight and taking out the weeds, and eventually at the right season, when it's the right season, because no seed can come out early. Either it'll die if it's either premature or it's too cold or the environment is wrong, right? I mean, it's pretty simple when you look at nature. We have to follow the seasons. And I think this is one big breakthrough I've had over the last few years is just embracing the season I'm in. Even when I'm in a winter season, and I mean, I fought God in my last winter season. I was like, this is terrible. Let me out of here. He's like, no, not yet. You haven't learned things yet. I have to get some of these weeds and some of these chip off these things off of you. And then, as you said, when you are ready and he's trained us and we've been through boot camp, then we have the tools to actually take ground. Because, wouldn't you agree, doing things prematurely can actually be just as bad?
It can be very harmful. Yeah, it can be harmful to you and harmful to others. So being able to, right, there's a pace to that grace and favor on what you're doing. And so staying with that pace and not rushing to get ahead or lingering way far behind when God's like, hey, we're over here, like, what are we doing? And I think all of these perspectives, all these things we're talking about are important things to keep in mind in the context of setting goals, because you can put a goal out there and that's great, but knowing the season that you're in can actually help you to set goals in a better way, as opposed to something that's so far out when you're like, the season I'm in right now is I need to be focused in on this particular amount of time. I need to be thinking in smaller chunks. I need to be thinking, those types of things. Whereas someone else might be like, listen, I've been through a season of a whole lot of stuff and God's opened up a whole lot of things to me right now. And so I'm thinking further out, that the goals are bigger, and it's like, that's cool. There's grace on that too, whatever the season is. So the season that you might be in, maybe this a slow, methodical season. The season you may be in, be like this, no matter what season it is, God's grace is on that season, if that's the season that you're in. And so you can think about and posture your heart when you're setting goals or setting whatever it is. People call it different things. Whenever you're doing that, thinking ahead, planning ahead, strategizing ahead with that context in mind. So then those who are in a season of rapid pace, you're not feeling like, oh, hold on, slow down. God's like, no, that's what we're doing right now. And there's grace on that right now. And so keep walking with me on this thing, right? So that person doesn't feel bad. And the person who's on the slow, methodical pace right now is not feeling bad about their pace. Your pace is your pace for your season, which is your season. That's it. No comparisons to other people. No comparisons to even your 5 years ago. Just what are we doing now, Jesus? And just focus on that pace.
And I think that's where the peace comes, is when you're at peace, knowing, okay, if I'm in a cave and God is working things out for me, it's not for time for the rest of the world to know where I'm at. And it's really like, Stormy O'Martin says God gives us enough light for the step we're on, because he knows if he overwhelmed us with too many, we would step out in fear and we'd be our own humanness. We wouldn't rely on him. And for me, that has been the biggest breakthrough, is just embracing the season and the timing. And even like now, a lot of people are in a situation where their whole world has been turned upside down. Their new normal is not normal to them. So instead of fighting the current, we just need to let go and flow with the current, because it will take us further And we won't drown if we're constantly trying to keep ourselves afloat, because it's like, okay, God, what are you showing me today?
Yeah.
And even if it means just every morning, like, okay, what's on your heart today, God? Instead of us, because I'll admit a lot of the time, God will be like, I will tell you if you shut up and stop talking.
Right.
I'm like, and he's like, trying to like interrupt me. So
Right.
I'm like, okay, God, what's on your heart today? What do you want to tell me? And like sit on my hands and try to be still. And for me, and as us go-getters, the term rest and sitting still is like, oh my gosh, I need to do something. Like seriously, like what is this? I mean, even like when we first connected, I was in that season of like, God was saying, you need to slow down, you need to rest. I'm like, oh, no. Ain't nobody got time for that.
But there's such beauty in like learning how to really rest in him and walking that out with him. It makes all the difference, because when you do that with him, you get the beauty, the fruit of the kingdom. And that's joy, that's peace,
Exactly.
And that changes everything.
Exactly. The whole rest thing. So, as we wrap up, can you just sort of summarize, like, what does that rest mean? Because I think a lot of us get confused, myself included. It took me a long time to figure out what this means. Resting doesn't mean go take a 24-hour nap and never get up again. It doesn't mean you sit and do nothing.
Yes.
What does resting in the Lord look like to you?
Yeah. So when I think about rest, I think about an awareness of the presence of God. Like it's just an active awareness of the presence of God in your life. And so people are like, well, I don't know. What does that mean? Most people operate as if they don't have an active awareness of the presence of God in their life. Like the active, not just the fact that he exists, but the active involvement, presence of him in your life. And when you can operate out of that place of rest, that means that you're sensitive to his voice. There's an intimacy there that you can flow from. There's an identity of who you are in him that you're able to work from if you're doing it from a posture of rest. And sometimes that rest will be literal. Like, be quiet, sit down for a little bit. Stop doing that for a little bit. Sometimes that rest will look like that. And sometimes that rest will be just in what you're doing and the work, having that active awareness that I'm here with you. I've got thoughts. We're still together. I'm here. I still have solutions. I'm still provision. I'm still all of these things, and active awareness of that, because that changes the way we're able to flow in life. But yes, sometimes it will literally be rest, physical rest. It will be that too sometimes.
Exactly. And I think that's a very important concept for us to understand. And
Yes.
It took me a while to figure this out, because I was always thinking rest meant that if I was not doing something, but you can be doing something.
Yes.
But at the same time, another thing that the Holy Spirit said to me is, listen, you're a human being, not a human doing. So how about you just be who you meant to be, and let me take care of the rest. And it was a real revelation, realizing, okay, God, like today, what do you want me to do today? And he's like, okay, I want you to write this blog post, or I want you to read this book. I'm like, okay, cool. Reading the book, and you're like, oh, mind blown. I just learned something. He's like,
right.
Stick with me. We'll go places.
He had a better idea,
Much more productive way.
Yes. So it's just a matter of doing these things with him as opposed to apart from him, or assuming that we have all the best answers. A lot of times when our hearts are aligned with God's heart, and our thoughts and our dreams and all those things are aligned, a lot of times it might feel like, oh, well, you are creating, you're entrepreneurs, you're creating, you've got ideas and all of those things. But in all times, knowing that there still is access to an even better one, and always having an ear attuned to a shift, a need to shift, and never getting to a point where we're feeling like we've got it all together, we've got it all, and now we're going for it, and that's just it, right? I think there's, in different personality types work different ways, but I think that's really important, because he does give us freedom to create. He does give us freedom to build, and all of those things, but we just want to align our hearts with his heart, our dreams with his dreams, delight ourselves in him, so that he gives us the desires of our heart.
Exactly. And that is the whole point, right? Why we walk with God is so our lives are a testimony of what he wants to do in us and through us. And
that's right.
I just say, the sooner you can learn to relent and let God have his way, the sooner you'll find peace, calm, and understanding. And it'll, to the rest of the world, they might be paddling crazy, but you're just very chilling, going down, enjoying the scenery. And really that is the goal. So sometimes it can be a bit of guilt, feeling like I'm not working hard enough. And especially for us recovering perfectionists, I gave up my membership to that a long time ago. And I tell you, it's like so much better. You can just chill and relax with it and things just happen. So I really appreciate all this content. I said, I love to listen to you. Your podcast is always awesome. But tell everyone, what's the best place they can find you online and all your resources?
Sure. Best place to go is to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com. That's where you can get it connected to everything that we've got going on. So kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.
Exactly. And you have a podcast and you do a mentorship program as well?
We have our Igniters mentoring. We have a course called Firestarter School, which is available at the price of your own choice. And that allows you to get just like key foundations of making this shift to doing business in partnership with God. And so you'll get information on that right when you head to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com. Click on the Start Here button and you'll get all the details.
Exactly. So definitely make sure to connect with Shae online. Find her on social media. She's very active. Her podcast is great. Always some great content there to keep you enthused. So make sure if you connect with her, let her know you saw her on the summit. So I got to say, if you've enjoyed what Shae had to say, make sure to share it with your friends. I'm sure you know somebody who could really benefit from this. And, any comments, and we love to have feedback. So let us know about that too. But if you also want free resources that are only available to our summit viewers, make sure to go to mimikacooney.com, click on the summit tab, because every one of our speakers is offering something like a freebie or goodie that you can get. So make sure to do that. So Shae, tell us a little bit about your freebie. What are you offering for people?
Yeah. So what we're doing for the freebie is we are doing what I'm calling Firestarter School 101, which is a portion of our Firestarter School, which is completely available to you for free. And so that's what you'll get at the link.
Exactly. So go click on that and you can download those resources where you see Shae's information. So I got to say thank you again for taking the time. And even though we've had technical issues, we shall prevail.
That's right. We shall prevail in Jesus' name.
Exactly. So I got to say thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you everybody for watching, and make sure to connect. Until next time. Bye.
Take care.
If you want more free resources that we only share with our newsletter community, go to mimikacooney.com and sign up today. We have great resources like ebooks, inspirational screensavers, printables, and exclusive access to our community.